The roots of contemporary chaos. Some thoughts on the problem. Chaos, lack of order, thus disorder, uncertainty, perplexity, confusion. It is not difficult to discern these traits in the contemporary state of affairs, domestic, international, on a moral, conceptual, linguistic, even physical plane. What happens where there is chaos, lack of order, anarchy? Well, there is always the intervention of a deus ex machina, that is to say, an order that is imposed, that is even begged for by the disorder that is underneath. We hear talk of a new world order as a quasi-providential, anyway, historical necessity that is there to save us. The machine, technology, but also its way of life, primarily its way of life. Technology as an imposition, as a call to embrace a new anthropology, a new way of conceiving the human being. This new way presupposes that the old way is bankrupt. The old way is not well understood in a climate of chaos. The old anthropos, the old human being, the one that is supposed to be superseded in a technocratic regime by the cyborg, by the robot, the zombified human being who, or that, sees everything mechanically, approaches everything mechanically, as soulless. This old human being is a human being that is traditionally understood in terms of natural reason. Now, that natural reason, an adequate understanding of which is favored by the study and acquaintance with the study of medieval sources, medieval scholarship, that human being is understood as fundamentally rooted in what we could call here the mind of the universe. God, divine intellection, the perfection of human understanding. Now, that perfection does not have to deal with the vicissitudes of ordinary life the way we do. So we have, as human beings, we have natural reason. This is what we used to call it. Modern man, at the dawn of the modern world, what we have is an abdication of natural reason as understood in classical and medieval terms. A new reason was established, one that no longer sought to restore our experience in the light of divine intellection, but that sought to establish a new world, in Shakespeare's terms, a brave new world, that could solve problems that had been left unsolved in earlier ages. This is to say that it could dispense us with the challenge of relating what is below us to what is above us. That is a great challenge, a heroic challenge. But in the modern world, we do not need old heroism. Old heroism is to be replaced by a new form of bravery, and again in Shakespeare's terms. But let us see what sort of discourse or reason is to replace old natural reason, a reason that is none other than the presence of divine intellection in determined situations. And so in man, the human being there is understood in his essence as this presence of God in the finite. Well, what about modern reason? Modern reason, or symbolic reason, modern symbolic reason, grounded in a modern conception of mathematics, of number, of language. So modern reason is and would eventually be even accused of being instrumental. It is a means or a method to apply certain ideals to particular concrete situations. The particular here is conceived as devoid of universality. It is bereft of soul. It is to be redeemed out of a situation of utter disgrace. And only a machine can do this. Only a mechanical reason can do this. A scientific reason in modern terms. The reason of Homo faber, the man who makes things, who is born to make things, an engineer. So instead of relating what is low to what is high, so to speak, what is lofty, what is above man, modern reason is to apply symbolic forms, so ideals, empty universals, that are in fact the forms of reason itself, in Kant's terms, Immanuel Kant. Apply them to bodies. Order our ordinary experience in terms of these forms. Now, as bodies are denied an original order, or as they are denied a natural reason, a reason inherent in them, they become more unruly. And here we have the unfolding of the modern world. As our bodies become unruly toward this new mechanical reason, the mechanical reason has to organize itself in institutional forms that are more stringent, ever more assertive, in order to, well, control physical bodies, order them in the new manner. Machiavelli had, in the early years of the modern world, Machiavelli being a prophet even of modernity, Machiavelli had spoken of the channeling, well, the fueling and channeling of nature, of bodies, of sentiment, of passions. He says, well, in earlier times, they tried to, scholars, poets, philosophers, tried to moderate the human passions, bodies, for the sake of returning to immoderate heights in theoretical terms. So, contemplation of the divine and so forth. Or of all things in the divine. But that is inadequate. That leaves problems unsolved, and we want to try to solve these problems now. How do we do that? Instead of moderating our passions, we should fuel them, fuel the fire. If you fuel it, there's more confusion. If there's more confusion, you can control it. You can control people's lives. You can order them, but how? Not to return to God, because that requires moderation and something more intimate. No, into the construction, to the building of a new world. Homo faber, again. So the contemplative man is replaced by the engineer. Now, as this happens, our sentiment, our feelings, our bodies are more and more, our physical nature is more and more alienated from, on the one hand, its inherent reason, which is obscured by our upbringing, our mechanistic upbringing, and from the order that appears to be imposed upon us. That order includes language. Language acquisition is conceived in mechanical terms. Today, kids learn language almost entirely through the computers, the digital devices. Moral frameworks are conceived, moral principles are conceived in mechanical terms. How does the machinery of modernity administrate these passions that are so unruly toward it? Well, it does so, and even at the dawn of modernity, we see predictions, intimations of this. It does so by channeling the passions. We are induced to feel at home and thus feel free when we accept imposed order as an inevitability, a necessary evil, perhaps even. Yeah. So the 19th century invents, in concrete terms, invents history as this stage of inevitable unfolding or evolution of change that is occurring and that we should embrace. Because falling short of this embracing of change, we are lost. We are lost in unruly feelings. Classical education would advise us that that is a lie, that we are not lost insofar as we can be educated in a classical sense, in the sense that we can cultivate the reason that is immanent in our physicality, a natural reason. That is, again, the presence of divine intellection, and thus of the order of all things, in concrete terms. But that means that the end proper, end of reason, is not the building of a new world, of course, but the return to the foundations of the old one. This is what natural reason is all about. But we have abdicated that natural reason. And the new reason is manifesting itself today in these forms of, well, institutionalized forms of control. The digital world is the manifestation of the new modern reason, which finally establishes itself as the embodiment of, the consummate embodiment of human freedom. So, if you want to be free, if you seek salvation for your body, that body must project itself in the machine and see itself in strictly mechanical terms. Its own salvation, its salus in Latin, is found in the machine. So we are currently witnessing instability with respect to this challenge of integration. Bodies have a hard time accepting that they are irrevocably, radically grounded now, or to be grounded in a machine. In the 18th century, we have various prophets of this situation, from Leopardi to Mary Shelley, and they are, in some cases, mocking, producing satires of the predicament that we find ourselves in today. The idea that we can reconstruct man, simply in strictly mechanistic terms, appeared monstrous in some cases, silly, childish in others. Today, we are no longer educated in classical terms. We're not even educated in romantic terms. With Romanticism, we have the dream of the alliance between man and God. And it is a dream now. It is no longer a medieval reality. For the connection between man and God is established in terms of feeling, sentiment, no longer in terms of reason. And so this, of course, opens up the door entirely to the advent of the dynamo, the great machine that is to regulate our everyday lives. For feelings alone are not practical. You cannot run a state on feelings. You need realpolitik. You need Machiavellian strategies to deal with historical necessities. That's what we used to calling them. And so Romanticism is really a Trojan horse, a consolation prize as we move forward toward the triumph of modern reason. That triumph, still in the 19th century, was denounced as a bankruptcy the destruction of reason. Even in the early 20th century, we heard of this. And of course, the death of God, which meant the death of all man, was heralded, sometimes decried, sometimes appealed to as the sign of a new age. Well, all of this has fed into the rise of technocracy. So technocracy and, of course, the sense, the historical consciousness of inevitability. Well, technocracy is an inevitable, logical manifestation of an underlying problem. So is there still a place for natural reason? Well, that would be as today. I would be as if, as asking if our bodies were still our bodies. And this is not to be understood in transmodernist terms as possessions. Our bodies as our possessions that we can dispose of as we wish. Our bodies in the sense of our physicality, our being determined, our being in finite terms, our sentiment. So is our sentiment, our feelings, something that has a natural or inalienable order, thus a telos, an end, a proper course, independent of the demands of modern reason, mechanical reason? Or are we compelled to make, to produce? Or are we essentially engineers? Okay, this is really the big question. And, well, if you accept the modern revolution altogether, then its own logic tells you that you must sacrifice your own sentiment, also your own imagination, your common sense, and embrace the new Deus ex machina, the new God from the machine, the mechanical God, or the new machine as God. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to embrace this deal, this pact, this new covenant with the machine, the logic of the machine in Faustian terms, then you will join the crowds who have bought into it. And so you will end up with an utter loss of classical humanity. And you will be condemning yourself to lingering as fuel for the new machine. Otherwise, the possibility of turning back is always open. You can fall asleep, and in your dreams, you can go through some kind of purgation. You can rest and let the noise fade in the background, fade away, and recover a sense of humanity. And it will not suffice, of course, to return to romantic conceptions. That is absolutely inadequate for the technological imperative is really at home with romantic impulses. finds itself quite comfortable, cozy with. It can dispense them, it can dispatch them, it can control them, these romantic feelings, without any difficulty whatsoever, in terms of values, in terms of ideals. What is a problem for technocracy, of course, is natural reason. So, a proper education is necessary. You know, what happens if we don't find teachers around us? Well, we still do have old books. So old books, you can go to Shakespeare if you read only English. And from Shakespeare, you can move on to earlier writers, classical literature in Latin. There are, of course, translations, but very often that is inadequate. We have certain scholarship, more recent scholarship, that has addressed the problem of the obscuring of natural reason. We have a book called Natural Right and History by Leo Strauss, written in the 20th century. There are other works, but an education is an effort and discipline that goes along with it is necessary to respond to the this assault upon the human being by the new Deus ex machina. So this consummate manifestation of modern reason. An effort is needed, and falling short of investing our lives in this effort without being led astray, distracted by the technological imperative. You shall die, you shall lose your soul, you shall fall into oblivion if you don't embrace it. Well, as long as we fall for this imperative, we shall not make an effort to discipline ourselves and to listen to classical sources. If we don't, we will fail to recover confidence in natural reason. We will therefore fail to save ourselves from the contemporary Leviathan, the great administrator of chaos. Dante referred to this already in the 1300s as Belzebub,